Ladies and gentlemen, today I, Chandrika Sharma, on behalf of Her World India, would like to welcome you to the talk show series. Today we would be discussing about the after effects of COVID-19 pandemic and how life dynamics would undergo a drastic change in the post-COVID era. We feel privileged to be hosting this show in collaboration with Policy Center and Gender Lab, Miranda House, University of Delhi. Policy Center and Gender Lab provides research opportunities in the fields of social sciences, policy shape up, and research studies. So today we have with us Dr. Padma Srivastav, HOD Neuroscience AIMS. We welcome you, ma'am. We are grateful for your presence. We also have with us the founder and the editor in chief of Her World India, Ms. Rakhi Bakshi. Her World India is a brainchild of Ms. Bakshi. During the session, I request all the attendees to keep themselves on mute. And without much ado, I would request Rakhi ma'am to commence the session. Over to you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
So we are very, very privileged today on Her World India to have an esteemed speaker, and Dr. Padma Srivastav. She's the Chief of Neuroscience Center at AIMS Delhi. And we are going to talk about the whole mental health aspect that we are also struck with right now in this pandemic, about women, about children, and all sections, classes who are suffering from this. And what we are discussing mainly sometimes in on mainstream platforms are those very visible aspects of the disease and how we are dealing with it. But mental health, we really feel is very, very crucial. And we are really, truly delighted and honored to have Dr. Padma Srivastav with us. Welcome to the show, ma'am.
Thank you.
So first of all, let us begin by saying that at this time, how much do you think the whole mental health aspect, the neuroscience aspect, the science of it all that you're dealing with has become also very, very crucial? Of course, we are dealing, as I said, with the visible parts of the disease and trying to get medicines, hospitals, beds, ventilators, oxygen that we've talked about in numerous editions we had earlier. But mental health is very crucial. Please throw some light on that.
True, Rakhi, and thank you so much for having me on board today. So let's approach this in two different ways, and both are running parallel. One is that the brain is also involved in COVID. So structurally, we have the involvement of the neurosciences per se in terms of a structural pathology. Say, let me give you an example that along with what we traditionally thought that COVID was all because of lung pathology, it all started that way. And then we went on to know that it is a multi-system disease. It can involve other organs besides the respiratory system. We've also had people presenting primarily as brain attacks with a fever which is involving the brain, like in terms of encephalitis or just what we call as altered behavior or altered sensorium, various stages of encephalopathy or coma, without any lung involvement, without a low oxygen, without the known, the entire spectrum with which you identified a COVID infection with. So that slowly emerged, and now it's well established that COVID can involve the nervous system along with the respiratory system. It can also involve nervous system without involving the respiratory system. That's very, very important to understand. Now, besides that, it's also been seen that during the COVID infection, whether it is mild, now you're aware of that very common complaint of loss of smell, isn't it, Rakhi? So loss of smell or anosmia, ageusia is loss of taste. Now these have always been in the checklist that you identify, and it red flags that perhaps one has developed a COVID infection, and usually associated with a mild COVID infection. So that has sort of spurred people to understand whether this infection can have, can do this beeline into the interiors of the brain through the olfactory or the sensation of smell. And believe me, loss of smell is one of the earliest parameters which go on to develop a famous memory problem, Alzheimer's disease, and also one of the commonest neurodegenerative condition called Parkinson's disease. Okay, so there are a whole host of neurodegenerative conditions which have also been linked, and that's actually been now clubbed into the long COVID or even in the COVID survivors. And there is a massive multinational 140 country the research collaboration which is presently ongoing, looking into this aspect, whether the COVID survivors would develop these later. Now, that is a physical problem. The other parallel that you're talking about is a mental health issue. So the mental health issue could be, as you rightly said, coping up with a COVID pandemic, whether you're affected directly or indirectly, whether infected or there's someone else who's dear to you who's infected, and dealing with the logistic and the extremely stressful situations which have been unknown to us in the last 1 century. So that has taken its toll. Now, apart from that, the mental health issues per se, as what we call as neuropsychiatric manifestation. Okay, so that is dealing with a bunch of neurotransmitters, neurochemicals, and hormonal issues which go into a disbalance and thereby presenting in terms of a behavioral syndromes, whether it is depression, whether it is aggression, whether it is something very akin to post-stress, okay, a post-traumatic stress disorder. So going through this all and therefore manifesting as a stress disorder, which has a lot of somatic manifestations. Look, you psychologically are down and you manifest it in the body in terms of sudden, palpitations, or it could be, sudden severe heartbeat, there's profuse sweating, there's giddiness, there is this profound, a sensation of dizziness and prolonged headaches, which are new onset, which go on. And of course, you heard of those terms called, mental fog or general sense of confusion. There is an executive dysfunction.
I want to come in here, Dr. Padma, and please talk about this brain fogging, because this is what we keep hearing from people, patients, to generally reading about it. Please tell us more about it.
So this has been described in a COVID survivor. So whether it is whether it is a mild COVID or a moderate or even severe COVID, you have heard of a term called long COVID. So the long COVID are the complications which set in after surviving the original severe infection. Okay, so a part of the long COVID is also what is described as mental fog. Originally, it was described from UK. Now, this is a state of confusion. So the things which have been very familiar to us, we do it automatically, reflexly, which come to us because of our knowledge, because of our training, that becomes derailed. So things become unclear, things become difficult, known tasks will take longer period, and you have a lack of clarity in decision making. So this is not that you're losing memory, it is more of an executive dysfunction. So say, for example, you're sitting in a high executive board, taking decisions was coming to you on your fingertips. You're known for your, very logical, analytical brain, and you come to the right decision very fast, but that you're unable to do it anymore. So there is a lack of clarity, a general feeling that I have a fog in the brain. I can't think clearly. And added to that, there is the sense of, impending sort of a gloom, a thing that I'm not okay. When am I going to be okay? Why is it that, I'm physically getting okay, I'm fatigued, but I'm able to do my activities of daily living. But anything beyond the normal activities, anything which requires more than that, there is not much of clarity in terms of doing it rightly and fast. So
okay,
what
new learnings, Dr. Padma, having been in the field and as an expert, what do you think have been the new learnings for experts like you especially? So for example, as simple and common citizens, we heard that, somebody panicked already, even if somebody doesn't have COVID, pre-COVID kind of scenario. Oh, what if I get COVID? Or what if I'm getting COVID right now? So those kind of, psychosomatic, as you said, troubles, to finally having been suggested that one is COVID positive, to then post-COVID, situations. So these understanding which some people talk about, some people maybe don't talk about. How would you really look at that?
So let's start off with just living in the current scenario in this pandemic, in this generation on this earth, right? So there are geographic, issues. And also along with geographic issues, there are also the socio-economic issues. So your background, your exposure to the infodemic, which is the information that you're getting barged upon right, left, and center, and being able to digest all that and being able to react to it. Added to that, now if you go through this entire pandemic, which is not even 2 years old now, every single day is a learning curve for us. When learning new things, COVID is actually teaching us new things. Some of the so-called truths have become illusions and vice versa, and you know that because we are all actually walking on a tightrope to balance out what we're facing with and try to mitigate the damage which is being meted out because of the pandemic. Therefore, now let's look at an educated person who is, say, a working professional. There is a young school child, and there's also an adolescent. Now, in three different ways, and another would be the women. Now, I would actually touch upon women separately because they have a whole lot of other issues which are probably besides this burden, they are burdened with far more things. We have a lockdown. We had a lockdown. We're still going through a partial lockdown. There is a work from home. There's also loss of economy, loss of other independence. There's a loss or there is limitation to your usual known activities in general, your social interaction, what have you. Added to that, you're bombarded with this kind of an infodemic, which is important because you need to understand also, but there is a whole lot of the Google universities and so on and so forth, which is also every small little detail which may come out before it is actually justified or verified gets on to the media and people read it. What has happened? Number one was that we were all on the lookout for a vaccine as a savior. The vaccines came and there was a lot of vaccine hesitancy. Then we had this thing of the first wave going down, and this whole thing about it lulled into complacency. People started coming out as though they're liberated from a prison. True. And there was a lot of inappropriate behavior. And then the second wave really hit us. At that point of time, there was a panic for survival. You had these issues of getting into, I may be getting, because the zero prevalence was so much and your positivity was almost 1 in 3, 1 in 4. There was a panic that I may be getting infected. If I get infected, I won't get a bed, I won't get oxygen. So the behavior patterns were that people were either hoarding stuff. The other was that you would get into a panic situation the moment you are positive, you run out. Or the other extreme, you will not want to go out. You will want to hoard that and do it at home itself. So therefore, you're reaching out for sort of a medical expertise way beyond when you should. So timelines were changing. And then added to all this was a family where you have a husband, wife, and children. The economy was down, so you had to curtail a lot of stuff. Number two is people, when they were mobile, they were going about their usual stuff. They would go out, come back in the evening. The family time was there, but it was limited in the sense that your interaction was not, they were not getting on each other's nerves so much. Now you're closeted and you're thrown together too much of a time. So there were probably issues, and in UK, in fact, there's published literature on this, but there was a lot of domestic violence, and the brunt of it was being faced by women who are trying to balance out of a lot of things besides economy, also the home front.
I want to come in here, Dr. Padma, sorry, but I want to come in here and ask you, since you raised a very crucial, important point that, of course, we must ask and understand. When you're talking about domestic violence, would you say that staying at home, and let's look at that phenomena, the familiarity and too much of spending time together, as you rightly said, created another kind of burden, especially for a woman? Whether for a woman who was a homemaker, who is a homemaker, or whether a woman who was going outside to an office, but now was confined inside a home. So there are two sets of women, but into the same situation.
Yes, I would believe that. In fact, there are a lot of research projects which were launched to look into this aspect of it with validated questionnaire. And this involved both educated personnel, uneducated personnel, because when you're stripping away everything else, the bare truth is the same, that you're a human being living with another human being or a bunch of other human beings in a closed environment where the responsibilities are either shared or dumbed down to one person, saying that that is the or your responsibility. We will do our own thing. We are in this closed space, but it's your responsibility to see to it that you do everything and keep us all happy. So that kind of a thing, whereas the woman does not have even the probably even a the venting capacity to
Exactly.
where will she is going to vent out these things. So there are families where the responsibilities are nicely shared. Those are, so a lot of it depends upon an interpersonal relationship and also the socio demographic economic background, the societal attitudes. And believe me, Rakhi, this is not just a developing world. From developed world we had a lot of domestic violence coming out, where there is more equity in terms of how you put them on one
On the
stage with
economic
that.
scale also, and you would think developed countries have more resources, so maybe these incidents would be less, but according to you it's not that. I mean,
Uh,
domestic violence, you are saying, is equally, if happening in developing as well as developed world. And I
it's
think
been reported, yes. Yeah, it's been
yeah,
reported from.
so let's again understand, when we're talking about women, I'll take it a little further, since we also partner with Miranda House College and we talk to a lot of young girls. What is happening to this, again, young generation, especially adolescent girls? There are their future, the career, the education, to their own interpersonal relationships, emotional ones. How would you really look at that, and how much they are really taking upon themselves?
So when you're looking at the young generation, the young people, uh, I mean, I'm an older generation. To me, also, this is, obviously for all of us, this is once in a lifetime. I hope it is once in a lifetime. We don't want to look at this again, but happen after 100 years. Now, the young, remember, Rakhi, actually, these are 0 years. 2020 went away as a 0 year. 2021 is turning out to be another 0 year in terms of both education and career development. A lot of their these steps to go further. And remember, the young actually are always in a hurry, and I do believe that the younger generation is smarter and much more brilliant than the older ones. It's genetically, that's how we are programmed. We evolve into a smarter species. Now the young ones need to achieve, most of them are achievers. There's a lot of uh, competition there. Now in a competitive world, the exams are not being held, so they are being judged on certain other aspects. Yes, that's also good. Number two is that after this stage, they have to go on to another stage, and the world is not waiting. So they have these parts of the other regions in the world which have opened. So they need to travel, and there are travel restrictions. They may have scored a seat there, but they cannot travel. So there's anxiety. When am I going to go and do that? And these are achieved through a competitive exam. So they feel let down. So in their terms of education, in terms of employment, and then we come to marriage, partnerships. And even in that situation, since we do have a COVID appropriate behavior, I know that a lot of these alliances have been put on hold. And there's an anxiety that when it is put on hold for a long period, what is going to happen? There is long distance, then you can't meet, and you're only interacting socially on an online. There is very little physical interaction again, because that is the appropriate behavior to tide over this pandemic. And all of these things will have some kind of effect on your mental capacity to cope. So the coping up skills are to be developed. And for that, people say that, okay, talk to each other, do the yoga. I mean, but it's easier said than done, Rakhi. It is not easy. And for at least for a
Very
young
true.
person,
Very
it's
true.
not easy.
I mean, I think your session, and I'm sure I'm going to run it, so many times also for all these people to be really able to understand, because these are the things that are closest to their hearts. As an expert, again, I would like you to share the science and the art of it all. So, for example, knowing certain things which are real, which are standing in front, crucial challenges. How do we engage creatively? What can we do also? To really, as you rightly said, advising, suggesting very easy, but to actually practically do it, especially when you're dealing mentally with so many things at the same time, is tough. But what you still suggest, that how to really create let's say a timeline, a schedule for oneself, and really try and at least look optimistically towards the
Yeah,
future.
Rakhi, again, it is easier said than done, but then it needs to be done, because that's of paramount importance to not just the young, not just a woman, to every human being right now living through this pandemic. And I do believe this, that we need to prioritize. The first thing is this too shall pass. It will. Then number two is that have, what we now probably have is a lot of me time, which you want, you can utilize. That is true, except for probably, certain professions, including yours, including mine. There are certain professions wherein you need to be out and you need to be working. But there are a lot of other professions where you do have a lot of me time on your hands. Utilize the me time. Don't be couch potatoes. Number three is definitely have some physical activity. Believe me, physical activity not only gets you physically healthy, but it is important for your mental health. It's absolutely important for your brain health. A 30-minute physical activity will keep your memory sharp, and it will actually help you get your clarity in thoughts and a lot of positive attitude. Number three, there is no magic panacea for all evils. There's no point searching for that holy grail. It's within yourself. Have your social interaction, keep your friends close to you, and have, I would say that, okay, fine, increase your family values, do yoga. All that is easy said than done. Even, I mean, I also don't do yoga, I don't have time for that. But the thing is that think positively, in the sense, believe me, this too shall pass. Even if you've been through very rough time, it's only going to get smoother from now on. And
Okay, another
take
aspect.
this as a 0 year. Don't expect too much out of it. Do what you can, and that's fine.
Thank you so much for sharing these insights. But talking about your lot itself, much was written recently. So many doctors lost their lives. So many medical practitioners, health workers are right now at it. We had a doctor who was working, lady doctor was working in an ICU ward. She expressed her own mental state at times. So how has it been dealing, through the prism of a health worker, would you say, with such tough times?
So, well, I look after a center, and I'm a neurologist. So we are dealing with both non-COVID and COVID. And as I said before, a lot of our COVID patients come straight with brain attacks and a whole host of neurological spectrum of diseases. Today, I just finished my rounds and I came in. So we're coming every day morning, go back in the evening. So I do maintain a protocol. So when I go home, I do have protocol where I don't enter with some amount of cleansing and being okay, because I'm exposing myself to my family. I got myself and my family vaccinated as soon as it has been available. But that's one thing, one ammunition we have. We have to believe in whatever we have now. And I'm fine. I'm happy doing what I do. So when I'm dealing with a patient, I do have a protocol where I need to protect myself. So if I'm protected, I will be able to continue to do these things. And if inadvertently something happens, something does strike, then we have to face up to it. And that's what a soldier does before he goes to war. And at war, we need to do what we do best to the capacity and accept what happens. Otherwise, how do you win a war? And this is a war, isn't it, Rakhi?
Thank you for those, again, very inspiring words. One thing, certain experiences, as you said, the patients coming from, let's say, very severe kind of symptoms to something that you can address maybe a little mildly. So what kind of experiences or cases that you're actually dealing with right now?
So I'm dealing with, say, for example, today's round, I've had, majority of these COVID patients right now, in fact, 76% of all COVID patients who presenting with a neurological problem are coming with brain attacks or strokes. Okay. And these guys have a blocked artery. So we unblock the artery in a specified period of time, whether they have COVID or non-COVID. So even if they're COVID positive, we go in and take that clot out. And that remains, because a blocked artery, then he's disabled for life. Besides that, we have a spectrum of encephalitis, meningitis, the brain fevers, the clots, which are not only in the arteries, in the veins, whole host of, seizure disorders, then, and also paralysis or because of involvement of nerves. If you come down to my ward, there are a lot of them. They're both non-COVID and COVID. And what I'm seeing is that a lot of them also develop a COVID infection while within the hospital, because it's an aerosol spread. So most of us are exposed to it. So when we do have a COVID facility, so when they're positive, we transfer them there. Once they're negative, we transfer them back and we manage them. So we are, in fact, in the institute, we're dealing with both COVID as well as non-COVID emergencies. And that's we've been doing for the last now 1 year how many months? 1 year, 6 months, and it's going on. And right now, there's some kind of a respite, and I'm hopeful that we will be getting back into sort of a plateau so that we can now then keep up the preparedness and the infrastructure so that we will not have to deal with the same kind of a panic we face in second wave. If God forbid we do have a third wave, we will be fully prepared, and there should be not be this kind of a scenario if and when it hits us.
Dr. Padma, appreciating the kind of center that you lead right now, which is very acclaimed, the Neuroscience Center at AIIMS. Tell us also about certain patterns. For example, even now in 2021, when you talk about rural areas, the kind of superstitions, the old traditions, dogmatic, behavior which prevails, do not really understand the science of it all that you have studied and you continuously work upon. So tell us about certain patterns, especially in a country like us, as to how we are growing as a scientific spectrum also.
Yeah, so India is unique because it has numerous geographic, economic, social, demographic barriers besides ethnicity and language and beliefs and faiths. But that's the beauty of it all. So it's a unique situation to be in, and I'm proud of this. So what are we dealing with? What is the concept? Now, health is not a luxury. Health cannot be bartered to haves and have-nots. Health is my birthright. For any citizen in an aware and progressive society, health is the citizen's birthright. And what is that health? It is essentially being holistically normal. And the health system should also be holistic in the sense we have different systems of medicine which are being practiced. Whether it is allopathy, it is Ayurveda, whether it is, whether homeopathy or other systems. And that's the reason we have Ayush, and we also have the general medical system, which is allopathy. And both of them actually work in unison. And being an allopathy practitioner, we ourselves also promulgate yoga. We have centers. We also have a healthy respect for the other systems. And for a lot of times, we say, for example, if you have a road traffic accident, will you do yoga, Rakhi? You will immediately go to a hospital because you need to stop that bleeder. Otherwise, one bleeds to death. The emergencies as such, whether it's heart attack or a brain attack or a road traffic accident or what have you, is actually dealt with by an allopathic system. It's important. In my rehabilitation, in the road to recovery, in a holistic health, I do amalgamate meditation in yoga and several other aspects. We've been part of task forces for Ayush in terms of other systems in delivery, as well as for a lot of diseases, which even for COVID, there have been a lot of research in other parts, and we look at it scientifically. So essentially, all the systems have truth. Some have been traditionally been there for centuries. So they need to be scientifically practiced by legitimate practitioners, and you have to amalgamate all of these. And that's the science which has to go down, percolate. And I believe when you're looking at interiors of society, the systems which are closer to the heart are the immune systems. So we need to get them also into the fold of the general medical system of health delivery so that they would be able to approach and be acceptable and available and affordable to majority of the population. So I do believe that all systems have to work in unison and scientifically. Then you can get across these barriers and also dispel the myths and misconceptions. And in that, we definitely need to involve the ambassadors who are close. Now, they can be the panchayat presidents, that can be the ASHA workers, that can be the local religious heads, that can be several of those who have a hold on the local and interiors of society. If I go and tell them, they're not going to believe me. But people they respect, if they tell them, then they will start believe. And I think that's what we.
Okay. One word which really became prevalent, which we are facing also, you referred also, lockdown. Do you think after this era, we will look at lockdown and its effects, especially looking at mental health, looking at all these disorders that you talked about, whether PTSD, anxiety, and I can tell you today, share with you, some of the people who are very educated and are holding responsible positions have come on our show and they have shared their own challenges, very openly. So people have started to talk about it right now and currently. But do you think this lockdown effect will have a different kind of learning or takeaway further on?
So when I look at lockdown, Rakhi, I do believe that lockdown is a disciplinary action. In a society which doesn't need to have a discipline thrust upon them, you don't need huge lockdowns. Seriously. That comes in because the most important aspect in the current pandemic has been movement of people. So the travel is important, can be prioritized, but the moment you open, the travel becomes unprioritized. As I said before, people sort of felt liberated in coming out of a prison, and that's not just only developing world, even the developed nations, we've seen this phenomena. There's a clamor to be free, and they feel that freedom is my birthright. I need to be free. I need to go wherever I want. I need to enjoy. I need that entertainment. I need that interaction. You see, that's where probably things will go bad. If it is just a travel where people are going to earn their livelihood, people are going for their necessary professions, they're going to buy a grocery and come back and not go and spend time in a mall, then, and also the other aspect is, when you're looking at economy, there is economy with a cushion and economy without a cushion. So without a cushion is where you have the migrant, the labor, the lower middle class and middle class. With a cushion would be the higher strata. So somewhere a trade-off, somewhere it needs to be balanced out. And I do believe that lockdown had its consequences when it was first imposed upon, but slowly people have got used to it. Now, work from home has become a norm. And a lot of industries and companies have realized that they actually can do this on a long term basis. They probably don't need to go back to hiring a space, an office space, and everybody coming down at a particular period of time. So you can again balance out these issues. I don't think lockdown is the only reason for a mental health issue. The implications of a lockdown on these sections, which we just described, is probably more important. That as we need to recognize what we have to prioritize, and that maturity has to come now.
But
Without that, otherwise these terms will just be a term, and we keep blaming.
What happens, Dr. Padma, to digital stress? I mean, right now also we are talking online. What happens to this sudden, I would say in many ways, people were used to using digital methods and going online, but for some it's a compulsion. For example, the education, some of the meetings are happening, suddenly digital has become, a new normal. Some are comfortable with it, maybe some are not. So what would you talk about this whole digital stress today? The technology part is okay, but maybe being, faced with so much of digital interaction.
I understand that. See, but if you actually look at it as a stressful situation, then everything becomes a stress, Rakhi. Seriously. At one point of time, traveling and jetting across the whole world was a stress at some point, and some wanted to do it. So it is again individualized. At the same time, though, some amount of physical interaction is required. You can't live in your own cubholes and bio bubbles all the time. Again, I'm coming back to prioritization. What is necessary can be done. What is necessary should not. In fact, I tell this to my family too, that do not venture out and travel for unnecessary things. You may feel it is justified. Oh, I haven't met this person for a long time. I have to meet this person. Fine, do it later. Now it is not the time. So you need to prioritize. But if I have to, there is a medical emergency, I have to go to hospital, you need to do it. So I don't think that the digital stress is a new word which is coming in because it is now being rampant. Yes, when an education process is involved, whether it's schooling and college, and remember, it is online education in a lot of universities across the continents. People used to do it even before this pandemic. So it is according to what you require and what is practical. But in a school environment, in a growing childhood, growing adolescence, you need interactions which is beyond being always, virtual. So that's why probably we are losing out, and hopefully we will get it back. But on the whole, I think we can find this balance.
So my last question, and it's been a very engaging session, I must say, and I'm sure that everyone is going to benefit out of it, is that, how are we actually looking at, okay, I'm suffering, should I take medication or not? What should be my thing? Should I talk to people? Should I not? So those inner conflicts that you must be, trying to deal with scientifically as well. What would you say to so many people who would be watching this session?
Yes. So if somebody does feel a behavioral change, okay, someone has become withdrawn, someone doesn't feel up to it, you get up in the morning and you feel a sinking sensation in the pit of the stomach, you feel it's another heavy day, feel depressed and bogged down, now that's the time you need help. So you can talk. There is no stigma in talking to people. Talk to people you trust. And if you don't, there is medication to uplift. There are definitely those medicines which actually try to get back the balance of the imbalance which is happening in your chemicals and transmitters, which are happy hormones, there are sad hormones, which I have, if I have to name that way, and they get back that balance up again. So don't hesitate to seek help in terms of your own circle of people you trust. And if there is not happening, then you take help from a psychologist or psychiatrist. Medications can help you. But don't jump and feel that for every problem in life, it is a medicine which is going to help you. There should be a difference in that. Similarly, when there is a problem in trying to cope up with certain situation, give yourself a break. And there are timelines, there may be constraints, but there's nothing which you can't overcome. And if there is something which is beyond your capability, fine, let go. You can do better things. So I think you should know your limitations. Don't be in a rat race, especially in this pandemic. Seek help if you're not feeling yourself, and there are medicines to help you out.
Sure. Is there any question that anybody wants to ask? Then, of course, Dr. Padma is available for some time. See, I mean, they are, every time I feel that sometimes they're ready, but sometimes they're very happy listening and they're taking notes maybe. And that's also okay with some, because they then write it to us also. But I'm sure that on behalf of so many young people have asked their question. But I think the only question they would love to ask you is that when is the time that we are really going to have a very normal, happy life? We're going to have ice creams and parties and have a very so-called cool kind of life once again. We really don't know, Dr. Padma. It's tough to answer. But any such roadmap that we can look at?
Yeah, I think so. One is, of course, we're looking at the vaccination program. And if that gets definitely ramped up and we have a significant percentage ramped up and we pass through this third wave will happen. It's happened in the last pandemic. So we know these waves would come and go. But if these waves are really a plateaued up wave and not definitely impacting most cells, then maybe the early or the mid part of next year, perhaps we can be very optimistic of getting, not being a 0 year. But this year, I think, will continue to be a 0 year. So don't worry about it. But by the time if we have our vaccinations in place and we have a ramped up health infrastructure in place and the third wave plateaus off, we can definitely hope for to be, without masks and without all these constraints, maybe.
But vaccine for all,
The vaccines have to be for all, Rakhi. Vaccines have to be for all because we now know that it is gone beyond, not that the children would be are the only ones who are going to get affected, it's not that, but I guess now that's been the way forward. And if you actually look at the vaccination programs for a lot of infections, it is for all in most situations. So I think we are looking for all.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Padma. And I can tell you personally that, this subject is so close to my heart that, maybe we'll really have some other time, a very longer session with you and so many girls out there who can directly ask you questions, maybe an offline one later when things are normal. But thank you so much for your very valuable time and insights here on Her World India. And we wish you all the best, Dr. Padma.
Thank you. Same to you.